Neverwinter is not a game that I thought would be so damn fun to play in 2024. In my quest to find the best hidden gem MMOs that I had never played, I came across Neverwinter, a free-to-play MMORPG set in the Dungeons & Dragons universe. It has tons of fast action combat, combos, MMO elements, but really, how does it fare in 2024? Easily, it is one of the most fun free-to-play adventure MMOs that I have played in a very long time. In my mind, comparable to old Guild Wars 1. But let's go ahead and talk about it. Neverwinter was developed by Cryptic Studios and released in June of 2013. The game apparently set in the Forgotten Realms campaign setting for Dungeons & Dragons, and apparently uses mechanics similar to the 4th edition of Dungeons & Dragon rules. Now, this is all brand new to me, as I will be the first to say I don't know much about the D&D universe aside from that somewhere in the game there's in fact a dungeon and maybe a dragon. So this is a new player experience, and it was quite crazy for me. But I didn't realize how far down the rabbit hole I would go. So the first steps of any good MMORPG is to pick a race and a class. With me being the basic white bread and mayonnaise person that I am, I decided that I would go with a human fighter, mainly because the shield, it looked pretty badass, I'm not gonna lie. However, I could have also been things like the paladin, the barbarian, the cleric, the warlock, bard, rogue, wizard, or ranger. There were so many traditional fantasy classes, which it's always welcome, but it's cool to see that you can be a little bit more diverse. I found out later that these classes can specialize in their own unique ways called paragons, which offer them to be more diverse. For example, my fighter at level 11 is able to switch between a dreadnought or a vanguard, the dreadnought being more focused on DPS and vanguard being more tank oriented, which I will say is really refreshing, because one thing that I've always found lacking in MMORPGs is the thought that the shield can only be used in a defensive way, never in an offensive way. I mean, I remember during the Warlords of Draenor in World of Warcraft when they introduced the gladiator stance for prot warriors, which I thought was really cool. You had a little bit more offensive power. It didn't really take off, but I like the idea of the shield being used in more of a offensive powerhouse way. The races are just as diverse as well. Again, coming from the story Dungeons & Dragons history, this really wasn't too unexpected. What's unique about this is that each of the races have their own special stat bonuses, as well as their racial passives, which I love. Again, diversity and, complexity in your own role-playing method. I like that. Also, it appears that some races are behind like DLC packs and other features in games, so I'm just sticking with my boring old human fighter self, and that always seems to work best for me. What's cool, and this is going to sound incredibly goofy, is that I'm seeing a whole bunch of races here, as well as the damn location itself called Baldur's Gate. I spazzed a little, I was like, oh my god, Baldur's Gate, is that like Baldur's Gate 3? Please be gentle, I'm still so new to all of this. The game features a ton of questing, player interaction, seasonal affairs, and even some pretty fun dungeons, so let's go ahead and take a closer look. So we get the initial cutscene and a quick look at the UI, and I have to say this is absolutely fantastic. I love clean and clear UIs with very little clutter. I'm a simple person, and it's really nice just to be given, here's what you have, go for it. I have a couple of abilities as well as a blocking and cleaving mechanic. Upon searching for these, they apparently have like different potencies that provide more damage if I'm using one ability versus another. Offers a little bit of a layer strategicness to how I am attacking. The story starts off with us defeating these hordes of zombies, and like right out the gate, I have to say that the combat is really, really fun and it's fast. It is heavily action oriented, which is nothing to sneeze about. I mean, I really do like how it provides a lot of quick and fun like slashes. I get to use my shield as a blocking mechanic. I mean, it really flows very well. I mean, the floating combat numbers almost give me like a World of Warcraft or Guild Wars 2 vibe, and the directional swings of the attacks feel very fluid, which I loved even during the damn tutorial. Well, I fight through all of these, and then I get to the first boss called the Harbinger, and for a game that came out in 2013, these graphics aren't terrible. They're pretty damn good given the game. Like, I mean, seriously, look at the detail on this big boy. Holy crap. We get to the main city of Protector's Enclave, and we get our first movement around the main city hub, and there are quite a few players here. Now, according to SteamDB, which I had to go and look, there are about 1,000 daily player logins, which for an MMO is kind of low, let's be honest, but being here in the main city hub and it being a bit sparse, It can seem underwhelming, but there are a few players riding by. I also apparently logged in and started playing this during the Halloween event, which you get a whole bunch of cool seasonal stuff, what you would expect from most MMORPGs during a seasonal event here. I will admit, I really wanted to get this Vampire Bride for my companion, yet it seems that I logged in too late and I wouldn't be able to get enough currency in time before the event ends, so no goth girl for you, Caffeinated. We enter into the Adventurers Guild, and it literally has, like, everything that the player would need in one house. Like, it has the market house, it has gear vendors, companions, mounts, quests, and more. It's actually really, really nice because it's like, here's your main hub, go and do what you need to. I also have to make note of one really nice feature that I've seen, and that is the voice acting. Everything is voice acted. It adds an extra layer of immersion here. I know it's a lot more work internally, but like, I like the fact that there are voice actors going here talking about like what's going on and actually reading the quests off to you. And then if you click off and they were still talking, they will continue talking almost as like you don't have to stand here, but you could still hear what's being said. As I am going around, I get a mount and a few other guidance bits, but what's really awesome is like this little sparkly trail that leads you to where you go. I actually really think this is a nice touch, as it's like a guiding hand. Now, in contrast, it does remove the exploration feature a bit, but this game seems to be less oriented around like open world exploration and more focused on instanced zones and dungeons, if I'm to be honest. We get a quick tutorial of all of your combat capabilities, which really adds a huge layer of depth to the combat, such as the class mechanic for me being this massive shield block or opportunity strikes, which show this directional infograph around the enemy and let you know which direction you can attack to deal more damage while you are in combat. We also get this daily power, which seems to almost be like an ultimate, I guess. While I'm in combat, it builds up and then it can be used for one of the two different slotted abilities that I have. Like, and to start, I get one offensive, one defensive. It's actually pretty cool. Well, I experienced one of the first major changes to a traditional MMO that this game has to offer, and that is their leveling system. The leveling system in this game seems to be oriented around the quests you complete, not the amount of experience that you earn. As you go through the quests, you can earn the levels that are associated with it, and these quests seem to be a part of the main story anyway, so to be able to progress to max level, you have to do the MSQ, essentially. The combat opens up here a bit more, as my fighter can also attack while also blocking attacks, which I think is pretty cool. A lot of blocking in other MMOs only really allow you to block or attack, not both at the same time. I mean, like, damn, like, you got two arms, use them. The story goes through the rest of this first zone to stop a ritual, then beat a boss, and then we fight to the bottom of this clockwork catacomb to find an evil lich lady from the cinematics raising a dead dragon. Like, who's she trying to be, the Night King? Well, she flies off, leaving a massive phase spider to deal with, and I'll be honest with you, I hate spiders, especially ones who can phase. What's interesting about the way that this main quest has it set up is as you are going through the zones and the quests, they're all very linear, seeming like there's only really one path that can be taken when you enter into a zone. And you progress fully through that zone doing all the available quests, as that seems to be the only way to move forward. Again, it seems very campaign-oriented, which has to be said that this is Dungeons & Dragons, so that kind of adds up. I don't know what I was expecting here. It does, however, take a bit out of the sails for the true open-world MMORPG that I'm used to. However, with the lack of exploration, I do suppose that it keeps you focused on the main quest itself, which, again, if we're doing a D&D campaign, it's doing a really good job at doing that. I get a quick look at the in-game shop, and it all seems kind of what you would expect. A bunch of shop items that are really about cosmetics, seemingly. Maybe a few quality of life items, and what I could see, maybe some power scaling, but it doesn't really seem very pay to win. It's very tame in this manner. What I start picking up is the vast quantities of these Foxfire lock boxes, or these Foxfire boxes, which seemed, of course, to be the mystery loot boxes. You unlock it and you have a chance to get some crappy loot or some like really rare cosmetics, but it is oriented around you purchasing the keys off of the shop. It is constantly reminding you that you can have these really cool items at a random chance if you purchase the keys. Personally, I'm somewhat used to this from playing Guild Wars 2 and their Black Lion boxes, but buying the keys off the store, but for other players, this may be a very big nuisance, and it might not be something that they are interested in having thrown in their face all the time. As I continue to level, I get gear from almost every single quest turn in, and the item levels go up, like, drastically. And then once I got to a level 11, I start putting up numbers like several thousand, which in scaling, it looks like I'm hitting really big numbers. But maybe the mobs just have higher health pools. Like around level 8, I start to notice that I am far less unstoppable. I start taking serious damage, and I have to be very careful of the amount of mobs that I am fighting at one time. I can quickly be overwhelmed if I'm not paying attention, which is actually kind of nice to see. Is I felt like I was too powerful going through the initial levels, the first couple of levels. And now I'm starting to see a higher scaling point. Oh crap, I am not invincible. As the levels got higher and the dungeons got harder, I started to notice some of the really nice features of Dungeons and Dragons, which are like these traps that trigger when you walk over them if you're not being careful, or mimic chests that will attack you if you try to open them up. And even some of the randomly spawned features that seem to be required specific skills or kits to actually open them. It really started to do the game justice of less of an open world exploration and more like dungeon crawling exploration. There's a lot more freedom within those dungeons versus out in the open world where you'll be dealing with the quests. I worked to level 11 and unlocked my Paragon fields, which allows me to fit out and be more offensively minded with my options and my passives. And I felt like this was a good enough taste to really have a decent opinion of the game. So how does Neverwinter stack up with other MMORPGs? Personally, I think it does a really good, dedicated job for what it is made for. If you look at a game like Lord of the Rings Online, where people might say it's like, oh, there's less incentive for them to log in every day, you know, progress for new content here and there, there's no end game, what have you. While this may be true in some regards for Lord of the Rings Online, it is good at what it is meant to be good at. A faithful MMO adaptation to Tolkien's universe. When I look at Neverwinter, I believe it really does personify what I had imagined an MMORPG based in the Dungeons and Dragons universe. Neverwinter is not like, say, Final Fantasy XIV or World of Warcraft, but it does have a really good classic adventure vibe going for it. And the dungeon crawling is actually really, really fun. It does provide a scaling challenge for players to go off solo if they would like, but offering some opportunities to team up and join together with other players to take on some of the harder dungeons as you progress through. While it is fast and action-oriented, the combat does make it a bit more challenging versus, say, like a tab target MMO. But I think this offers a layer of skill for the players to be required to be successful, which is actually a very nice touch. One weakness that I will say in the game is, as mentioned, at times it feels less like an MMORPG and more like a co-op adventure RPG, similar to Guild Wars 1. When I think of MMOs in my mind, there's like some type of open world and player freedom that gets people out and about into all the different zones, whereas Neverwinter is very, very linear. Again, it's not a terrible thing, but something that I attribute to MMORPGs. I do like the self-contained zone stories, and it kind of reminded me of like Elder Scrolls Online in this regard, where you progress through a specific zone doing all the quests and the main story within there, and then you move on to a different zone and start that one, but they all have their overarching main story that's tying them all together. But I will admit, it's not even my favorite thing about this game, and my favorite thing was never the story. The combat in this game is 110% my favorite thing. It is worth every minute that you spend in the game. It really, really does have fast and flowing, action-oriented combat that almost feels like you're in a third-person RPG. The different skills and the abilities that we get as we level, and most of them requiring some type of free mouse targeting, really kept me engaged as I was going through. I will admit that some of the bosses that I fought going through the dungeons or any of the quests were unique to look at, but kind of very basic in fight design, so I didn't really have too much excitement coming from there, but I really did have a good time when I was pulling larger packs of enemies at the same time and swapping between open-handed swings and blocking to DPS them down. Now, I did not experience the other classes or really have an opportunity to join up with other players, as there really weren't too many other players that I could see that were doing my type of content at that same time. But I still did enjoy my time here in the game, especially with my companion dog, Little Espresso. Overall, I will say that Neverwinter is 110% worth playing if you like that classic adventure RPG. As mentioned, it feels less like an MMORPG, as there are players here and they are enjoying the game. It feels more like you're just on your own little quest, and you can flesh it out either with a companion or finding another player in the zone or on the quest that you're doing. And I'm sure as you get into higher levels, especially with the Paragon specs, it should require groups of players to work together to overcome dungeons and bigger enemies. So that is something that you can look forward to. But overall, I would give this game a solid 8 out of 10 for its capabilities of being a free-to-play, and I say this loosely, MMORPG. It's a great time to pick up and play and then put down maybe for later. Have you tried Neverwinter? Tell me your thoughts of the game down below. If you didn't know, I recently tried a illegal MMO called WoW Ascension, and it was a damn good time. You can see that video here. Otherwise, stay caffeinated, folks.